When it comes to directors showing off, nothing is quite as flashy as a massive long take. But sometimes they shoot something that's absolutely perfect. These are the top 12 long takes ever filmed. Kicking us off at number 12, the restaurant fight scene in The Protector. Tony Jaa's Thai martial arts return saw him leaving home to track down his family's sacred elephants after they're kidnapped by poachers. And nowhere is it more brutal than this 4-minute continuous rampage up 4 flights of stairs. It took them 4 whole days and 8 tries to pull this shot off, and they even had to replace the cameraman when the first one wasn't in good enough shape to keep up with Jaa's spree. But they eventually nailed it and ended up with one of the most badass fight sequences ever shot to show for it. At number 11, The Burning Barn in The Mirror. Tarkovsky's most personal film is also his most complex and least summarizable, so we won't even try. But just take a moment to admire this poetic long take. Although it's one of the shortest on this list at just under a minute, its languid, floating, fits the dreamlike tone of The Mirror perfectly. And what other director, besides the man who brought you the 9-minute-long candle shot from Nostalgia, would dare to reveal the final burning image with such restraint?
There's over 300,000 men on this beach, Private. You have to wait your turn.
At number 10, the beach sequence in Atonement. This 5.5-minute tour through Dunkirk Beach is possibly one of the most complex tracking shots ever staged. But the shot only became a long take because the production couldn't afford the obligatory 1,000 extras for long enough to shoot the scene conventionally. In order to cover the quarter mile that the shot required, the Steadicam operator went from the back of a golf cart to on foot, onto a rickshaw via a ramp disguised as a bomb crate, and finally back on foot to finish it off, all to create the incredibly staged living painting seen here. Coming in at number 9, the traffic jam scene in Weekend. Political commentary, black comedy, or intentional frustration, for over 7 minutes, Jean-Luc Godard's camera tracks horizontally as Corinne and Roland pass an increasingly surreal line of cars on their way to ensure that Corinne's father is, in fact, dead. The shot is full to the brim with bourgeoisie life in miniature, visual gags, and a final, harrowing image that is ultimately blazed by and leaves us with a portrait of the French middle class that only Godard could create. At number 8, the hospital shootout from Hard Boiled. If you're looking for reasons why John Woo is the undisputed master of action, look no further than this sequence. Hard Boiled follows plays-by-his-own-rules cop Tequila as he attempts to take down a crime syndicate, ultimately finding himself here in a hospital rescuing newborns and innocents from the mob. This 2-minute, 40-second long-take shootout perfectly captures the sense of flow between these two cops as they clear the corridors. The gunfighting is almost a ballet, and although it looks like they go up an elevator to a second floor, they actually come back out on the same set, leaving the crew exactly 20 seconds to clear and redress the entire floor.
Quiet on the set. Okay, everybody, quiet on the set.
Scene 1, take 10, marker.
Next up at number 7, the opening of The Player. The Player is a hilarious satire of the Hollywood backlot as it follows Griffin Mill, a studio executive who begins receiving death threats as he struggles to maintain his career, relationships, and life. Robert Altman's sweeping title sequence clocks in at 7:47 and manages to introduce every relevant subplot and relationship in the process. Altman wanted to prime the audience to sit up and pay attention to the plot that would soon unfold in the typically disingenuous manner of Hollywood, and the crisscross conversation snippets, which were entirely improvised by the way, do this perfectly.
Pictures they make these days are all MTV. Cut, 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 cut. The opening shot of Welles' Touch of Evil was 6.5 minutes long.
6.5 minutes, Walter?
3 or 4 anyway. He set up the whole picture with that one tracking shot.
At number 6, the famous bomb sequence from Touch of Evil. Orson Welles' timeless noir about a Mexican border town and the corruption and crime within it was also his middle finger to the studios. With a bad reputation for going over budget and schedule, the long takes in Touch of Evil were a way for Welles to prove his critics wrong. He wouldn't tell the studios how he planned to shoot a certain scene so that they would hear he'd spent a whole day just rehearsing and send someone over in a panic, only to arrive and find that he'd staged a long take which put him days ahead of schedule. But there's no disputing Welles' technical mastery. The level of suspense achieved in the very first shot is astounding. From the first close-up to the soaring wide, the entire shot absolutely pulses with anticipation for that final explosion. Coming in at number 5, the long take from Boogie Nights. When most people think Boogie Nights, they think of the spectacular 3-minute shot from the crane down through the club that establishes the entire movie. But we prefer the 3-minute long take later on in the film that follows Little Bill as he slowly searches for his wife, finds her sleeping with another man, walks to his car, and then murders her. Where the opening shot is spectacular for all it shows us at once, this one is spectacular for all it doesn't. We know something important is happening because the camera is still following him, but the plot comes so slowly, we're left to dread what it is until...
Explorer, this is Houston.
Go ahead, Houston.
Mission abort. Repeat. Mission abort.
At number 4, the very first shot of Gravity. Clocking in at an astounding 12.5 minutes, the opening shot of Gravity captures the beauty, breathlessness, and feeling of space like no film before it. Here, the long take makes audiences feel like they're in that world, floating along like an astronaut beside our heroes until the tension gradually ratchets up as the film literally hurtles into action, setting the pace for the story to come.
Thank you, sir. All right, see you later. Thanks.
What are you doing?
Closing in at number 3, the Copacabana Lounge from Goodfellas. Scorsese's most famous of long takes, and he's done quite a few, actually came about as an accident when he wasn't allowed to use the front entrance to the club. Goodfellas is the story of a man who always wanted to be a gangster, and nowhere is the seduction of that lifestyle more apparent than this one shot. For Henry, life is smooth, fluid, and easy, and this long take is the perfect way to show that. Just like Karen, we're thrilled to be led down a back corridor into the life of a wise guy, and Scorsese wouldn't have it any other way.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a Powell pay-per-view television event. It's hard to believe, but tonight's heavyweight fight is the swan song for the grand old Atlantic City Arena.
At number 2, the boxing match from Snake Eyes. Brian De Palma is pretty much obsessed with long takes, and not always for the right reasons. But it's hard to find one more intricate, massive, and absolutely insane than this one from Snake Eyes. Nick Cage is bouncing off the walls and going way over the top in typical Nick Cage fashion, and what better compliment for his insanity than a completely gratuitous tracking shot? This 12-minute long tour of an Atlantic City boxing arena perfectly sets in motion the conspiracy thriller to follow, and although the movie definitely collapses under its own weight, this first scene is always worth a watch.
Hey, you're snoring.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were. He always snored.
And finally, at number 1, the car scene from Children of Men. Alfonso Cuarón's bleak sci-fi apocalypse tale contains this shot here, possibly one of the most immersive long takes ever created. And instead of tracking across a massive beach or along a huge traffic jam, all it does is move around within a car. But that precision is so much more difficult than the grand expanse of some of the other shots on this list, and the effect is that much more gripping and intimate. Most people who saw the film didn't even notice that the camera never cuts their first time through. The shot itself took 12 whole days, and take a look at the rig they had to build to pull it off. There are 4 people sitting on top of the car as it's moving, operating the camera. But the results speak for themselves, which is why we think this is the best long take ever filmed. Before you jump to the comments to let us know which long takes we left out, can you say Russian arc? First, try and figure out which 3 long takes on this list actually cheated by stitching together multiple shorter takes. And as always, subscribe to CineFix for more IndieWire movie lists.